Hello, everyone, and welcome to not one but two games from yesterday's Clutch Chess, where the victories are still counted as 1 point. As you know, on day 2, it will be worth 2 points, and on day 3, a win will be worth 3 points. So it's a bit of a weird tournament like that, but that's why we love chess and weird tournaments. And it's Fabiano Caruana versus Gukesh Domarajo. So Gukesh started off with a loss against Magnus Carlsen, then he drew the second game against Magnus, and then he most certainly found his footing. And we're going to discuss what happened in the tournament, or rather on day 1 of the tournament. But first, let's check out these two games. Some of you were saying, okay, show game 1, it's the best. Others were saying show game 2, it's really, really awesome. I think both games are great. I myself would give an edge to the second game because, when it comes to chess, I'm a bit of a romantic, but both games are, definitely a thriller. So let's check it out. In the first game, Fabi has the white pieces, and he opened with pawn to c4. It's an English opening. We have e5, pawn to g3, knight f6, and bishop to g2. The king's English, where many moves can be played: c6, d5, bishop to c5, and pawn to h6. This is only the fourth most popular, but it has been played in many, many top-level games. Magnus Carlsen even employed it himself against Kramnik, against Hans Niemann, against Dingliren. Interestingly, all of the games where Magnus played it ended in a draw, but you have to know it. It's a nice surprise. Knight c3, we have bishop to b4 and pawn to e4. Okay, putting pressure on that d5 square, not allowing pawn to d5. And we have pawn to d6. Okay, knight g to e2, preparing castles, the usual stuff, pawn to f4 maybe. Knight to c6 and pawn to h3. And there are some games where bishop to c5 was played. Here we have pawn to a6 by Gukesh, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. Okay, pawn to a3, chasing away the bishop, bishop c5, and, we all know what the best move in almost every position is: pawn to b4, bishop to a7, and pawn to d3. We have knight to d4, claiming that center, and nicely continuing development. Bishop to e3, we have pawn to c6, and castles kingside by both players. Castles, castles, and king h2. Doesn't really require that much explanation. There's a bishop on a7, so it makes sense to make the prophylactic king h2, and later on you can play f4 if you so choose. Pawn to b5, we have pawn to f4, immediately going after the black king side. And here Gukesh starts an interesting attack, bishop to g4. And it's not a sacrifice or anything. As you can see, if the bishop is captured right away, then this comes with check, and the bishop on e3 is unguarded. So this would be a very quick loss for Fabi. So that's why Fabi plays bishop captures on d4, gets rid of that liability. E captures on d4, knight b1, and b captures on c4. We have d captures, and now you should, admit that you've overstayed your welcome, but not Gukesh. He says, no, I came here to fight. Doesn't matter that I lost the first game to Magnus. I'm here to fight. If you want, you can have that bishop. And indeed, it's the best move. So Fabi captures it. H captures on g4, knight captures on g4, king h1 as it comes with check, and now queen f6, preparing queen to g6, queen to h5, and the checkmate is very, very near. The way to handle this is, believe it or not, to play knight to d2. Fabi did not play it. You have to play it because after queen g6, you have to go knight g1. And now, okay, this knight is guarding d4 pawn. You don't have any weaknesses here. And if queen h5, then you have bishop to h3, and everything is fine. In fact, white is even winning. But we have queen to d3 from Fabi, and this allows Gukesh back in the game and makes his sacrifice a very good move. We have queen to g6, bishop to h3, and now rook captures on e4. And knight to d2 would have prevented this, so this is not the best. Bishop captures on g4, we have queen captures on g4, and now what do you play here as white? Well, queen captures on e4, there's a rook on e4 that's hanging. We have queen to h3 check, king to g1, and pawn to d3. So this is what Gukesh found, and is there a way out of this for Fabi? Yes, there is, but not the way he did it. He played pawn to c5, which loses the game. The way to play it is knight d4, and it seems just as bad, but point is that after queen captures on g3, you have to go king h1, because if you go back, then bishop indeed captures the knight with check, and then black is winning. So most likely we would see a quick repetition here, and we call it a day. But after d3 check, Fabi countered with pawn to c5, even dropped to 17 seconds on the clock, And now Gukesh is once again winning. D captures on e2, queen captures, and d captures on c5, preparing to open up the bishop once again with the discovery. And there's no way for Fabi to survive this. We have queen to g2, c captures on b4, opens up with check, and rook to f2. And, this is another example of when you're completely winning, you still have to be incredibly precise. And here, believe it or not, queen to f5 is just winning on the spot. But again, Gukesh, having a minute on the clock, doesn't invest too much time to find it. I will show why, because, well, you're going to lose the rook, and you can't really go knight to c3. Knight to d2 doesn't really do all that much, as the queen can come to c2, and then you really have problems, and then the passed pawn starts marching forward. But, for example, you unpin, okay, bishop captures, queen captures, and now rook e8. And the point is that you can't really avoid queen h5 check, which gains control over e2 and then rook e2, and that's it. Unfortunately for white, he doesn't have knight c3. Gukesh played similarly. He played queen e6, but now the queen no longer has access to the h5 square, and you will not have this important check with the coverage of the e2 square. So, okay, queen e6, we have king h2, bishop captures, queen captures, but now there's no rook e8, the move that we've discussed. So Gukesh plays b3, we have knight to c3, and rook to d8. Okay, the rook is in the game, but still, you don't have an immediate win, and Fabi is up a full piece. So, okay, we have rook to e1, attacking the queen, queen to c4, and now rook to c1, defending. And this is, again, very good for Gukesh. The way to play this, believe it or not, is to go knight e4. One reason why you might think that that's definitely not the move, because we can just easily kick away the knight, we gain control over d2, and surely something is winning. I mean, we have the rook skewer, and we also can push the b pawn. We have to be winning here. But even after pawn to f5, there's this tricky queen b6 move. And yeah, with little time on the clock, of course, you don't see such things. But this is a chess analysis channel. So we will show it, and there's nothing better than queen d4, and it's still very difficult move to find, because you have to calculate so many things. But yeah, now after captures and captures, black will have enough to draw this. Not enough to win, but it's definitely a draw. Still, white is the one that has to be careful. But okay, rook to c1 by Fabi, and now Gukesh goes in with rook to d3. We have queen to e2 pinning the rook, and now pawn to c5. We have queen to e8 with check, king h7, and now Fabi gets to trade off queens. Queen e4 check, queen captures, and knight captures. And here, best for Gukesh would be to play rook d5, because the pawn can never be captured, otherwise the b pawn queens. But he played pawn to c4, and now Fabi is back in the game all of a sudden. But yeah, I mean, they're constantly around 20 seconds on the clock, so no wonder. It's a 5-second increment, if you guys don't remember. Rook captures on c4, pawn to b2, rook b4, and now rook d4, very beautiful move, and now rook captures on b2. Fabi again blunders the game. The way to hold is knight c3, believe it or not, because after rook captures, after rook captures on b4, you're just gonna play a captures on b4, and that's it. You control b1, and it's still a draw, even though Fabi has a knight, but yeah, too many pawns. On the other hand, rook captures on b2. The move Fabi played is just winning for Gukesh. Rook captures on e4. And you might be thinking, yeah, it's a rook handgame, I'm down a pawn. Probably Fabi didn't even think this through, because why would it be lost? Well, you're going to see rook to b7. Okay, attacking the pawn, pawn to f6, and now rook to b6. Attacking the a6 pawn, rook to a4. Defending and attacking, rook to b3, and now king to g6. And you're wondering, well, okay, still, it's only one pawn. But yeah, let's play king g2, king to f5. We have king f3, stopping king to g3, pawn to h5, stopping pawn to g4. And white simply has... doesn't have enough squares to create some sort of an opposition where he can actually hold a position. He goes rook c3, and you might be wondering, well, let's just repeat moves. Rook b3, rook c3. Is there a way forward? Rook a5, and now comes rook to d3, pawn to g6, and rook to c3. Okay, makes sense. And now rook d5. pawn to a4, because you could play rook to b3, but then let's say pawn to a5, and after rook to c3, you're going to play pawn to a4, and now you no longer have b3, you don't have d3, and once you go rook to e3, then it's rook b5 followed by rook to b3. That's the path to victory. So Fabi realizes that's not going to work. He plays pawn to a4, pawn to a5, rook to b3, and now rook to c5. We have rook to d3. Again, Fabi just holding the third rank. g5. Captures, captures, and now rook to d8. We have pawn to g4 with check, as you have no way of stopping that. King to e3, rook to c3 check. We have king f2, king to f2, and rook to f3 check. King g2 and rook to a3 going after the pawn. Rook to d5 check. We have king to e4, and the rook captures on a5. So you defend the a4 pawn, but it doesn't matter. Now the black king is much too active. Rook a2 check, king to g1. We have king f3. Rook captures on h5, and now king captures on g3. Threatening mate in 1, and it doesn't matter what you do here. Fabi tried rook to f5, but it is now over. The king and pawn endgame is winning, and there's no way out of it. We have rook a1 check, rook to f1, rook captures, and just king to h2, grabbing hold of the queening square. a5, we have pawn to g3, a6, and pawn to g2 coming with check. And he was in this position on move 65 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. King f2, g1 queen would be played, and then whatever you play, you easily stop the pawn. No explanation needed, I believe, here. So this is what happened in game 1, and like I said, some of you really preferred game 1. I myself preferred game 2, and I imagine many of you will as well. Here Gukesh was white, and let's dive straight into it. Gukesh opened with the d4, knight f6, pawn to g3. We have bishop to g6 and pawn to g6, sorry, and bishop to g2. We have bishop to g7 and knight to f3. We have castles kingside, and pawn to d6, pawn to c4, and pawn to c6. Some sort of a symmetrical something, not really symmetrical, but mostly. And knight to c3. And the position is a very well-known one. You could go queen to a5, you could go queen to b6, you could go pawn to d5. Bishop to f5 is what Fabi goes for, also been played before, nothing new here. And knight to e1, preparing to strike in the center at some point with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5, pawn to d5, and captures. And the position has even been reached in 1995. Kasparov had this position against Michael Adams, and he won a very nice game. Adams continued with knight to e6. Not a mistake in itself, but not something you would play today, as the position has been analyzed with engine. So pawn to a5, this is the top move recommended by the engine. Pawn to e4 and bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Bishop to d7 has been played before. Bishop to g4 is a new move. So as of move 11, we have a completely new game. And pawn to f3, bishop to d7. And here you might be thinking, okay, what is Fabi ever going to do with that light square bishop? It's a horrendous piece and, just doesn't have a good future. Gukesh's bishop on g2, on the other hand, also isn't great, but at some point he might be able to do something with it. And now I think it's very instructive how Fabi goes about it. We have bishop to e3, knight to a6, we have knight to d3, and pawn to b6. Pawn to b3, and knight to c5. We have queen to e2, and now the immediate bishop to c8. And look at how easily Fabi solves the problem of the weak light square bishop. We have knight to b5, bishop to a6, and knight captures on c5, b captures, and pawn to a4. Okay, we have knight to e8, trying to pile up on the knight on b5. Bishop to d2, saying, okay, we might even be able to go after that pawn on a5, although very unlikely, as you will be able to capture, and then the pawn will be defended. But, we have to develop, and also that pawn definitely is a weakness. We have queen to b6 and rook f to c1. Here we have knight to c7 and bishop to f1, gaining more hold on that b5 square. Pawn to h5 and pawn to h4, and I think Fabi was very angry that he lost game 1, or rather not angry. I don't think I could imagine Fabi getting angry, but I think maybe a little bit disappointed, and he decided to go for a win here with black. But not only that, Objectively, it is the best move, even by the engine. He plays pawn to f5, captures, and now look at this. Bishop g5, going after bishop to e7. So you could play rook f7. Fabi decides to go rook a to e8, and now rook to a2. Preparing to open up the king side and shift the rook into the attack to go after the black king. We have pawn to f4, g captures, we have e captures, opening up an attack against Gukesh's queen, queen to c4, and now king to h8. Fabi knows what's coming, so he gets his king off of the g file, rook to g2, and now we have rook to f5. And this is where the magic happens. I will ask you to find the next move, even though I could have asked you to find any of the moves in this game, because the game is extremely tactical. This is the move that makes it all possible. What did Fabi miss by playing a rook to f5? It's a really tricky move. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute best move for Gukesh while I give you a couple of seconds. Yes, believe it or not, it is bishop to d3. And it's just, a free tempo that allows every line that you think of to be winning. It's just a beautiful move. And now the best move for Fabi is the one that no grandmaster will play. You have to play the rook back and just admit your previous move was a bad one. And then Gukesh plays king h1, rook to g1, doubles up, and he's probably still going to win the game. But Fabi will have the best chances of survival. But like I said, no grandmaster will ever admit a mistake. He plays rook captures on d1, continues with his plan, and now he is dead lost. And there are many ways you could win, but try to be the most creative. How do you win this in the most efficient way? While I give you a couple of seconds. It's a really spectacular, position. For those of you who found this, you probably are the ancestor of the great Paul Morphy, as this is not an easy one to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop to f6. And every line after bishop to f6 is possible due to the bishop being on d3. If the bishop was on f1 or on e2, it simply doesn't work. And the main threat is, of course, we're just going to capture on g7. But the problem is, if you just defend, then you get queen captures on f4, and that's it. You either, if bishop captures, then you checkmate on queen h6, and if the bishop doesn't capture, you still checkmate on queen h6 because the bishop here is pinned. So that's not going to work. The real question is what happens if the bishop is captured? Well, if the bishop is captured, then you get queen captures on f4, and again, you're threatening queen h6 checkmate. But now after bishop to g7, it seems like there's no such checkmate, but you still have so much time because none of Fabi's pieces are doing anything. You play rook captures on g7, and after king captures, look at this, king h1. And it's unstoppable. Whatever you play, best Fabi could do is hope to sacrifice the queen after rook g1 is played, but you don't have to do it. Just knight captures on c7. You fork the rooks. And okay, here you resign because you know that this game will be posted all over everything. You could capture, but then, just rook g1, king to h8. And again, if you had king h7, you might still survive, but you have to go to h8, and now queen h6 check, followed by queen h7, and queen captures on h7 checkmate. So that is the best move after a rook to d5. Gukesh played it, only he played it by first improving his position. He first played king to h1, which is also perfectly fine. Shows how Fabi's pieces are doing nothing. And then he's going to play rook c to g1, and then he's going to play bishop to f6. So he improved. This is sort of an unnecessary improvement of the position, or maybe it's just choosing a different move order because everything is lost for Fabi, however you want to put it. But Fabi goes bishop to b7. He has some tricks here, like sacrificing the exchange here and then maybe capturing on f3, but it doesn't work. And even if you capture on b5, it still doesn't work. Like captures, for example, a captures, rook captures on d3, you can just ignore whatever black is doing and play bishop f6, and it's still winning in the exact same fashion. There is one slight difference here. Knight e6 actually defends f4, but you can just play rook captures on g7, and that's it. Knight captures, and then you play queen to f7, completely winning. If rook to g8, then queen h5 is checkmate, as the knight is again pinned. So king h1, bishop to b7 was tried by Fabi. Now rook c to g1. Again, Gukesh sort of unnecessarily prepares bishop to f6. Knight captures on b5, and now he doesn't just recapture, he goes for it. Bishop to f6, as now it's an unstoppable checkmate. It was an unstoppable checkmate, a couple of moves ago, but yeah, it still works now, even better with the rook and king already in place. And now the idea is the same. If rook captures on d3, queen f7, and if rook to g8, queen captures on h5, is it the checkmate we've already seen? So bishop captures on f6 was played. Now queen captures on f4, and now Fabi finds the resourceful bishop to g5, which seems like, okay, it could give you a little bit of a problem, but rook g5. And again, you cannot capture. If you capture, queen f6 check, king to g8, and rook captures is checkmate. Again, you don't have the h7 square. And after rook captures on g5, queen to d8 was played, one last attempt by Fabi. And now Gukesh finishes it off with a beautiful rook sacrifice, rook to g8 check. And he was in this position on move 36 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Rook captures on g8 if played, then queen to h6 is checkmate, and that's all there is to it. So yeah, I don't know. Some of you probably prefer the first game. I don't know. I prefer the second one. So, that's why, we are allowed to prefer different things. But yeah, both of the games were incredible. Both of the games, at least game one could have gone either way, but game two couldn't have gone any other way. And Gukesh just, definitely shows his class, making Fabi's pieces on the queen side absolutely useless and just showing, what's what. So not only beating Fabi 2 games in a row, but also as Magnus lost 1 game to Hikaru, Gukesh is the leader after the first day of Clutch Chess with 4 points. Magnus second with 3.5, Hikaru third with 3, and Fabi having a pretty bad day one with 1.5 has a lot of catching up to do. But like we said, on game 2, victory is worth 2 points, and on day 3, a victory will be worth 3 points. So yeah, you can have an off day 1, but you really shouldn't have an off day 2. And if you have an off day 3, probably having a good day 1 and day 2 doesn't really mean all that much. So it's a tournament where you can always come back, always start doing well if you start doing well on day 3, for example. It's going to be interesting, and I have no idea, who could win this. Probably Gukesh now has the best chances as he's now leading, but yeah, a loss on day 3 will be very, very painful for anyone. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Very nicely done, taking down Fabiano Caruana like this. I mean, especially this game 2, this is a masterclass, and taking down Fabi like this is, simply unheard of. So I hope you enjoyed it. I've really much enjoyed covering it, and seems like the game will be interesting. It's a crazy time format, 10+5. Players aren't used to it, and I think all the games could be like this. We'll see what happens. I would like to thank P.A. Bauer, Gerard St. Pierre, Basis Valley Chess Society, Francesco Corradi, and Uzi Shale for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.